Om Guru, Om Guru, Om. Om Guru, Om Guru, Om Guru, Om. Om Guru, Om Guru, Om. I bow to my Guru in the infinite. I bow to him in you. It's wonderful to have this book here to read from, because it would be very difficult to come up with 365 subjects for one for every day of the year. But this book has more than that in it. So I'm able to use this as sort of a crib sheet, but much more than that. I'm not trying to teach my teachings, I'm trying to teach my Guru's teachings. And many of the teachings are contained in this wonderful book. He told me to write down what he said, and this is the product of my writing. I was with him many times, and I would write down, maybe while he was there, maybe afterwards, but I remembered his words very clearly because I could hear him speaking them again in my mind. It was interesting that when he was going to go to India for 3 years in a row, he was going to take me with him and several others. I told him one day, he was Bengali, I told him I think it would be easy for me to learn Bengali because I speak quite a few languages. I grew up speaking many. And he said, very easy. And then he repeated words in Bengali. And 8 years later, when I went to India and learned Bengali, I found my memory had been correct. It's just, hat, chok, khan. I could hear his words. I can hear them still. He's very real to me, even though he left the body 52 years, 4 years ago, whatever, 52 years ago. It still is just like today. And yet I don't like to live only in the memory of him. This, I think, is a very important thing that many people make a mistake in. They remember what it was like then. But he's right here, right now. I think always, also, and much more importantly, and all these years I have done it, asked him, what do you want? How can I serve you now? Not just how can I fulfill what you did back then. What do you want me to do now? What answer do you want to give this person? How do you want me to act? You know, for many years, people in India used to plead with me to come back to India because there were many people who had faith in me here. I had thousands of people in Delhi. And I couldn't come back because I didn't want to be a rival to his organization here, and I was not in that organization, and not by my will. I didn't want to be a cause of disruption of anybody. I have no sense of competition. I love them all. They are my gurus. They're my brothers and sisters in my guru. I have nothing but love for them. And then I used to think maybe God wants to, because I saw they weren't doing anything here, really. His work was asleep. And I thought, well, maybe he wants to do this through some other channel. But in time I came to realize, and when I was convinced that he wanted me here, that's when I came. And yes, I'm an old man, and yes, it's late in a person's life to begin a new work, but I don't have to do it single-handed, which I would have had to do back when Pandit Nehru gave me permission to build in the Greenbelt area near Birla Mandir. That was a great miracle, and the reason for everybody else in my Guru's organization to be so afraid that what will he do next? But I believe in serving him with courage. I believe his message is deeply needed here. And now that I know that he does want me here, and he does want this work to grow, and he was not his wanting, but God gave him this job for the world, not just for America and the West. Since then, I have been putting all my energy into it, and I have a team of wonderful people who are working with me. It's so joyful to know that there are so many people who have come from worldly homes and backgrounds and so on, and living in a spiritual community because they decided and knew that what they wanted was God. That bit by bit you see that worldliness sort of sloughing off like the skin of a snake. And what emerges are beautiful people. I have 1,000 people living in the communities I founded in America. And this picture back here, which I tried, and I don't suppose you've been fooled for a minute, but I want you to imagine it as a window onto my garden in America. From this garden looking out over the valley in the Nevada City foothills. It's a lovely home. I didn't sacrifice anything coming here, although yes, you could say, because it's a lot more beautiful than what I have now in just beginning efforts in India. But all of this, I'm willing to give up anything to serve my Guru. I could live in Harlem, I could live in slums. It would not matter, because I only want, I feel that I'm in this world such a short time. I'll be in eternity with God. I'm not interested in this life. That's what my Guru taught to us. Don't be attached to this world. Don't be attached to the hopes that you will find what you're looking for here on earth. Let me read to you from this book here. It's saying number 184. After the master finished writing his Bhagavad Gita commentaries, I often walked with him around his desert compound in the evenings. On one such evening, Boone, who was another disciple, and he had just arrived, also walked with us. Boone at first walked beside the master, who took his arm for support. A moment later, however, the master released his arm with the word, hot. He then asked me to walk with him so that he might use my arm to lean on. Boone left the path, and that was because the heat in his arm that he emanated was because of delusion. It's simple. Boone began to, Master needed a degree of physical support on those walks, not because he was ill or infirm at that time, but because his state of consciousness was remote from this world. And after doing the Gita, it was so interesting. When I read that book, he had me editing it, I thought, this is the greatest book I've ever read. It's just so deep and so wonderful. He told me, I understand now why my Guru never wanted me to read any other interpretation of the Bhagavad Gita. Because I see now that he didn't want my mind to be influenced by other people's thoughts. When I wrote this book, I just attuned my mind to Vyasa and let him write this book through me. That sounds, to modern thinking, a strange thing to say. But I saw him do that also with Omar Khayyam, when he wrote the commentaries on the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, and I edited that and put it out as a book under the title, The Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam Explained. But as I worked on that, I used to feel that he was in tune, the two were in tune together and working together in producing this commentary. And you might say, well, that's a pleasant, sentimental fantasy. So I'm going to repeat a story that's very interesting. I was lecturing later that year in 1994 in Sydney, Australia. I'd been invited to give a lecture at the Theosophical Society's hall there. And I talked on the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. That's what I was requested to speak on. And then afterwards, a man in the audience raised his hand and said, well, this particular passage, I'm sorry, I don't remember which one it was. He said, it doesn't the explanation doesn't seem to correspond exactly or clearly to the words of the poem. And I said, you know, I did have that experience in editing the book. Sometimes it wouldn't seem clearly in touch with it or clearly to spring from the poem itself, but as I meditated on it, I saw a very clear connection. And so I am quite certain that in the explanation you will see that. But then what was very interesting was that a woman in the audience, she said, I'm from Iran, and I can read ancient Persian very well. And I've read the Persian, and I have read the English version of Edward Fitzgerald, and I've read Paramhansa Ji's interpretation. I know that passage this gentleman is speaking about, and I have to agree that it doesn't seem on the surface to correspond to the English words, but that's Edward Fitzgerald's fault. What the master wrote, it follows exactly on what Omar Khayyam wrote. You know, my guru didn't know Persian, but he knew Omar Khayyam. He was in tune with him. Time to these masters doesn't exist. I mentioned one time about a friend of mine, an Indian in Los Angeles, who talked about another Indian friend of his who had gone to to get a Brigu reading in the Brigu Samhita in Hoshiarpur. And the reading stated, as this is being read, there will be a thunderclap. It was a completely blue sky. There were no clouds anywhere. How would a thunderclap happen? But just at that moment, there was a loud thunderclap. Brigu, I would assume, because time is all a delusion. It doesn't really exist. It's in God's mind. And so Brigu at that moment came to create that phenomenon to give this man faith. And so when my guru said, I tuned in with Vyasa and let him write this through me, I know that is not just a pleasant fancy. What he wrote was what Vyasa wanted him to write, told him to write, wrote through him. One time, because my guru wrote interpretations, explanations of the sayings of Jesus, and then he wanted to be sure, and I think this was partly to reassure people who were dogmatic Christians and couldn't accept this very Vedantic explanation of the teachings of Jesus. He was a great yogi, but most Westerners don't know that. And so he said, I prayed to Jesus, was this what he wanted? And he appeared. And the Holy Grail, which is said to be the cup from which he drank at the Last Supper, others give it a more mystical meaning, but he said that that Grail appeared and passed from his lips to my lips. And he said to me, the cup from which I drank, thou dost drink. The masters are in tune with each other. One time I remember he was telling a story of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he said, I will let Chaitanya tell this story through me. I don't have time today in this talk to tell that story. It's a wonderful story. But the thing that I wanted to bring out is that he said, I will let him tell this through me. So the great masters have this kind of attunement. As when Yogananda wrote that poem, God, 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 he said St. Francis gave it to him. They're in constant communion with each other, in constant contact with each other. And when people in their folly think, oh, this master is greater than that master, oh, this master was this way and that was that way. I've noticed some disciples of Ramakrishna say that because he was the first one who said that all are equal, therefore he was the greatest. What kind of nonsense is this? God is one. God is in all. And he plays in one way through one group, one way through another way through another. My guru as a boy, when he was with his guru, was trying to compare two works, and I assume it was Ramakrishna's work because they were living at that time. My guru's guru said, my Param Guru said, why do you make comparisons? This is the way God wants to play through you and me. It's all God. and the future and the past and everything. Yogananda, you remember, if you've read his autobiography, in the first edition, it's complete. For some reason, they took out about a quarter of it. I don't know why. The first edition I really recommend. But in his poem, and I think it's in both ones, all thoughts of all men, past, present, to come, float within the cosmic sea. He was aware of all. This is the state of samadhi. And yesterday is as equally today as tomorrow will be. It's all one. So in that thought, in reading this, in walking with the Master then, he said to Boone, "You shouldn't talk so much when I'm in this state." He paused a moment, swaying slightly as if about to fall. After a few moments, he began walking slowly again and remarked softly, "I'm in so many bodies. It is difficult to remember which one I am supposed to keep moving." And I noticed that any little thought that I had, he knew it. He would comment on it sometimes. It's not that I had wrong thoughts, but, well, for example, there was one time when somebody who was just a flatterer was saying, because I said I would be lecturing in the church on Wednesday, he said, "Well, then I'll be sure to be there." And I didn't like to accept that flattery, so I didn't respond in a dignified way. My master caught me on it because he wanted me to learn how to teach people properly with dignity. So he told me once, "I know every thought you think," and he proved it. So remember, God is always calling to you. Seek his love above everything. Joy to you.
Listen, listen, whispering within your soul, hints of laughter, hints of joy, sweet songs of sadness, of quenchless yearning for the light, for my love, your true home. Long your heart has played the dancer, long you've toyed with merest shadows of the treasures left behind you, deep in your soul. Long you've plumbed the dark for answers, long you've begged from beggars' empty hands, gifts of life they too were seeking, gifts none could share. Friend, how long will you wander? Friend, as long as you seek your home in a land where all are strangers, love locks her door. Leave to the weak his grave, and life to the coward leave his dreaming. Oh, my saint, wake up, reclaim the light, seek the truth behind all seeming. Leave to the weak his grave, and life to the coward leave his dreaming. Oh, my saint, wake up, reclaim the light, seek the truth behind all seeming. Turn, turn, turn within, in silence of soul, in cave of love, find my abode. Listen. of joy, sweet songs of sadness, of quenchless yearning.